And today I'm real excited. We have a special guest, our special guest in-house. Not like sometimes we, have people far away in other states, whatever. We have my buddy here, Wayne Colonna, the president of ATSG. He is Mr. Transmission himself, as I call him. He doesn't like that. To my left here is Pierre Rispo, the vice president, Eric Dibna, and Neil Recruity. Oh, whatever. I'm killing him. At any rate, let me say, like any team, ATSG, and having done some stuff with these guys at Show Power and a couple of different venues, they have a great team of people. It always takes a team, just like the guys here at TST, to put something together and be good at it. If you're not familiar with ATSG, it is a technical hotline. I was first introduced to ATSG years back with their little passkey books. Information on transmissions, where, it's unbelievable how you guys have stuff drawn out, diagrams that are second to none, and you should thank your team with Pete Lubin and Jim Dial, the guys that I do know, and many other people that we have up on your screen. Those are the team of ATSG, and maybe Wayne, welcome, Wayne Colonna. Welcome to the chat here, and we're going to just ask you a bunch of questions. And why don't you tell us a little something about ATSG? Where you're located first?
Well, ATSG is the technical support group, and we do more than just a technical hotline. And like G said, we do have a great team, and it originated in Miami with Bob Chernay many years ago, and it migrated to a second office out in Missouri because of Dale England and
Dale, good guy.
Yeah, he actually was working with Bob Chernay, and after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, there were several people that lost their homes, didn't want to rebuild in Miami, so they moved out and we started our second office in Missouri. So that's how we have an office in Miami and an office in Missouri. And the office in Missouri, we built it where it had a nice sized garage, and we did a lot of the R&D there. And the one in Miami, Bob Chernay really liked the 7th floor of an office building, which I didn't particularly care for. And we had our transmission R&D room on the 7th floor, and this particular building had nothing but attorneys in them. And so I'm going up and down. I'm going up and down an elevator with transmissions on dollies and stuff like that. So it was an interesting time. But once Bob retired, and it's an employee-owned company, ATSG.
Excellent.
We moved to our own facility, and so we also have a nice-sized garage, and it's also where we do all the manuals as far as printing and shipping. And all of that is done in Miami, and we have a great team. I'm grateful for Pete Lubin. He's been with us for quite some time, and in fact, Dale England just recently died, and we miss him. He was the one who taught us how to draw and how to illustrate.
And you did a good job, because I can tell by your books, and I've seen you draw.
Yeah.
And you do actually does a great job. If you look at any of the ATSG books, and by the way, they're all available on the ATSG website.
Yeah.
And as we're doing tomorrow night, drivability meets transability. There's so many things that you really need these books for. They're quite helpful in seeing, hey, maybe the car ain't running right because maybe you have something locking up, like a lockup converter or some sort of training problem.
Mm-hmm.
So they have great stuff that you need to check out. Not a commercial for Wayne, but I want you to be aware of what they do. Check their website out. If I'm not mistaken, it's atsg.com.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. So, yeah, great stuff.
So Dale was the one who taught us to draw, and now that he passed away, Pete Lubin gets up in front of the seminars. He starts saying that now that Dale is gone, that he is the oldest living person at ATSG, being 70 years old now. So I like to tease him and tell everyone, if you have any transmission questions at all, he can handle anything from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. And his wife Barbara helps us out with a lot of things. But then we have Jim Dial, who is a phenomenal man.
Top notch.
He's the elephant guy. That guy remembers everything. He remembers everything. I don't think he knows how to forget anything. Just tremendous, and a
great presenter as well.
Yeah, he does seminars, and we have a guy from Canada, Gerald Campbell, the Canuck, and he's a comedian in his own right, and we just got a lot of great guys, and without all these great guys, you know, I go out and I get to do seminars, and a lot of that content is figured out by the whole team. You know, it's not like as you put me up there, the guru. I'm really not no guru, but you know,
to me you are.
I contribute, and really grateful for all the guys at ATSG. So
That's great. It's a great team. So tell us a little bit about what ATSG does. Obviously, you're in the transmission industry, so big franchises, which we won't get into names, besides independent shops, can pay for your service. You run like a hotline, is that correct?
Yeah, we have an annual fee if you wanted to have the full service with ATSG, which means that you'll have access to our website, which we have all of our bulletins up there, and we're also putting together quick reference guides of like the passbooks.
Those passbooks are great.
The passbooks that you're talking about was done in the 90s that we did, and it gave you quick ways to check the entire system, and we are doing the same thing now with today's transmission. So we're doing all these quick references up there.
And the other nice thing you had, and I think Pierre had this experience when you were building your BMW transmission.
That's right. I wanted to take it apart on a Saturday, and I went on the website and downloaded the manual on a Saturday, instantly.
Yeah,
That's great.
That happens even on Sundays too.
And all over the world.
All over the world.
So we have the website, and then the unlimited access to the hotline service. And of course, then you get discounts from the bookstore as being a member, and any of the seminars that you attend. But if you feel that you don't need the service in its entirety, we do have a $30 per tech call service.
So this is something not done on the internet, but people call you and actually speak to a live technician.
You actually call and you speak to a woman, and she takes your information down, and then you're called back in time order. I have 10 guys that are on the phones, and the calls come in quicker than they can respond to them.
How many phone calls do you get a day, approximately?
We do about 300 calls a day. 300. Sometimes it gets as high as 350. And so, you know, the calls are not usually 5 minutes long.
No, definitely.
You know,
I know because I've called.
You know, it takes time, because sometimes the problems that we have they're insane. The technology today, we're dealing with some crazy stuff. So many times we don't have the answer right off the cuff.
No,
we have to do a few steps in diagnostics, and then they come back to us and we work it down.
And let me ask you a question. I bet most people call up looking for a silver bullet. Saying, hey, Wayne, what's the problem with this?
Yeah, and sometimes we have it. Sometimes I tell them to buy a case of Coors Light. And they can have a silver bullet.
They have a silver bullet. Very good.
Yes.
Very good. In case you didn't get that, you know the TV commercial. But,
supposedly a bunch of girls come out too when you
would really be so lucky. But,
That's your question, bro.
you know, how many times do you run across where someone, you know, needs to use their meter or their scan data, and maybe they're not giving you a good reading because they don't know how to use their meter?
Well, we have a whole range of technicians that you know, their words are our eyes, and you know, it is funny. sometimes we'll have a tech call where they're saying that they have a lockup problem. And we think torque converter clutch. And we're trying to solve a torque converter clutch problem, and they're talking about a 1-2 shift and it binds up instead of, and they're calling that a lockup problem. So words sometimes can get us, in trouble.
Sidetracked.
Yeah, sidetracked. So yeah, and if they're not using the meters correctly or know how to use them, that can be an issue. Yeah, that's definitely a problem for us.
Excellent. Now, do we have any questions there before we, okay, good. So, it seems like it's the same thing in the drivability part, us guys, where we have the same issue. A lot of guys cannot use their scan tool fully. They're pretty poor on using meter fuses, as we've seen for years. They're blown. Voltage drop is one of the major problems.
Well, it's interesting how many people don't understand voltage drop.
Or electricity, actually, Ohm's law in general,
Oh,
you know.
yeah,
And tomorrow we'll be showing some real things
Yeah.
on the car.
yeah.
So to make sure you guys tune in tomorrow, by the way, we'll give yourself a plug on the drivability meets transability tomorrow night.
Yeah.
That'll be on vehicle, so that's great.
Right.
Not able to hear the audio.
So this hotline, how many years has ATSG been running this hotline?
Since 1985, late 1985, really fully blown 1986. Is Bob Chernay was originally with ATRA and helped them get their tech department up and running. And there was some conflict there, and
he moved on his
and he
own.
moved on with ATSG, and that was near the end of 1985. He did a few things, but really the beginning of '86 is when it really picked up.
Wow.
And 1987, I think, is when they started requesting membership, offering membership. So we still even have subscribers to this day back then.
Wow.
And,
for all of
and there's not too many of them left, though.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of guys, as we were discussing earlier today, a lot of the guys in their 50s and 60s are going out,
Yeah.
and there's no one taking our places.
No, we don't really see too many 30-year-old, 40-year-old men in the business anymore.
No,
Yeah.
it's pretty tough. So we have the same thing in the repair end as you do there. Now, how about your seminars? I know, I've been to them in the past, and I know you do a bunch of them. How many do you offer, and where do you offer these seminars?
Okay, what we do here in the United States is once a year we put together a seminar that we do in each city. It's
Each city?
Yeah, we go to a lot of the main cities.
cities.
We go to New York,
Yeah, I know we do them
Chicago,
down there
San
for-
Francisco, LA. We go to a lot of the cities. So usually by August, we sit down to determine what we're going to put together for the following year. Because once we determine the content, then Miami and Missouri, we split the material up in drawing and in writing. So it takes us all this time so that by Thanksgiving, so from August to November, we have to get all the material done.
Wow.
Then over the Thanksgiving holiday, I collect all that information and compile it and put it in an order, make the manuals, do the intros and the covers and all that kind of stuff. Get it all ready so that the rest of the month of November into a little bit of December, we try to edit it. And that's a critical point because we've been looking at it for a long time. And when you look at it, sometimes you just don't see the errors.
Oh, we know about that one.
Yeah, and then it goes to print because the printers need it all that time because our seminars begin in January. So they need all this time to print those manuals. Meanwhile, we put the PowerPoints together, so in January we start. Now, we usually start off with GM. One of the things that Pete Lubin does is medium-duty trucks, and he's into the hybrid training. So he contributes a lot of material in that regard. But we start off with GM, we do medium-duty trucks, we do hybrid training, then we do Ford, Chrysler, and imports. And we handle that in that order, and we do a full day from morning till night.
Are these like their insight, the insight manuals you were doing, the counter problem?
Well, the insight seminars those are specially ordered seminars that occurred, which is something separate. These are what we do typically all throughout the country, but every now and again we get hired to do specific seminars. And the insight one was actually the result of many years ago, maybe 12 years ago. One of our members on transmission shop would call us and they couldn't figure out an electrical problem. So they sent it to a drivability shop. The drivability shop could only go so far because they didn't understand how the transmission worked. And so the car would go back and forth. So the guy would call and say, listen, I know that I'm a member, but I can't, I need help. Can you call this shop? And so we started helping out drivability shops for the transmission shop.
Okay.
But then Paul Lowers got me involved in doing some drivability seminars, which is how I met G at Jim Linder's, and those seminars blew out into the drivability world
Yeah.
as a result of that, and it had increased over the years. And we do Identifix calls to transmission shops, or the transmission calls that they receive, we do them for Identifix. And 10 years ago, we would get 5 a week. Now we're up to 50 a week. We're seeing guys who used to work in a transmission shop that go from a transmission shop would have 2 builders or 3 builders. Now they're down to 1, and one of them finds themselves in a drivability shop or
So,
a dealership.
That brings something up, Wayne. It seems like even major transmission franchises now, they're not just specializing in transmissions, they're doing a bunch of drivability stuff now as well.
The specialty shops are dwindling. Everyone seems to be needing to do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
It's not the direction I wished it had gone.
Yeah.
I'm a transmission guy and I would like to just stay transmissions, but we get phone calls with questions beyond transmissions.
But
And we-
they can't really be totally separated.
not
transmission problems-
anymore, not anymore. I mean, we got ABS that's affecting
Yeah.
transmission operation, engines affecting
Sure.
transmission
Cylinders
operation.
being shut down that you think, is a tranny problem or vice versa,
Well,
they're related.
Just today, we had a Volvo that they couldn't program the transmission because it had an ABS issue.
Yeah. So these are things that, you have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
And, one thing I have to say is we've had you out here quite a few times. When I say out here for our TST group, Wayne has taught for us many times. And, the guys who get it have come out and seen Wayne and said, oh my God, this is really helpful information. Some people have tunnel vision and go, well, I don't need to know transmissions. You can't do that nowadays. If you're a technician, you need to know the whole picture.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons, I'm gonna bring this up, Wayne. For years you wrote for a major publication, and just recently, you switched over to Powertrain,
Well, okay.
Powertrain Pro, did I get it right?
Yeah, all right. What actually happened there is, again, you can't fight the change. The change is there. The change has already happened. It's really, it's past tense, so either you're gonna be in the caboose or you're gonna be in the front of the parade, and ATSG wants to be in front of the change. And, so Motor Age, as you know, is the oldest automotive magazine in the United States. It started in the 1800s, and it was, they started with trains, and then they went over to cars. And even my dad had Motor Age. I remember my dad having it. And it goes to 120,000 shops. And out of those 120,000 shops, 68,000 general repair shops say they do work on transmissions. And another 12,000 are transmission shops. So to move over to that side was to help ATSG members, our subscribers, who are needing assistance beyond transmissions.
Okay.
And still be able to receive transmission information
Now,
as well.
Let me get the audience caught up with Wayne's referring to Wayne is now with Motor Age magazine,
Right.
just so people are correct.
Right, Motor Age.
And the new magazine is called?
Well, no, it's Motor Age magazine.
Right.
In that magazine is everything about the car, right?
Correct.
One section of it is about transmissions,
Got
which
ya.
is called Powertrain Pro.
Pete, you see that? Thank God he's here. You know how I think.
All right, Powertrain Pro is the section in the magazine
That's
about
right, okay.
transmissions.
So you got
or
confused
in
there.
reference, right. Now, twice a year, maybe 4 times a year, it's gonna come out as a special edition, like this coming June, this coming month.
That's.
It's gonna be a special
That's what I wanted to bring
Powertrain
up.
Pro edition, which will be about a 50-page magazine, just dedicated towards Powertrain Pro. But the magazine Motor Age itself will have a 10 to 15-page spread, maybe a little bit more on transmission-related items in the magazine, among all these other
Right.
aspects of the car, so that, you know, a technician could be fully aware of many aspects of the car in one magazine, and then, of course, the magazine points you to the website for additional information and stuff like that, so.
Well, it's very good. I think, you know, you coming over to Motor Age is a big help to a lot of technicians and shop owners out there. And I think it's time, as we discussed for quite a few years, for the technicians on the mechanical side to kind of get some of what the technicians on the transmission side.
Yeah.
So it's like putting us together in really getting these vehicles diagnosed correctly.
And you see, that's sort of what our webinar is about tomorrow night, drivability meets transability, because you know things about the car that I don't know. I don't know things I know things about the car that you don't know.
Exactly.
But I'm saying meaning what the
Right,
industry
the industry.
we represent.
Yeah, you can't possibly know.
No, and so.
No one can know it all.
I want my ATSG members to be able to know that they have access to like your organization, where they can get help beyond transmissions, and your people can understand and get help on transmissions.
It's a big network of people.
Yeah, because it's doing this. You
Right.
as much as you might not like it, it's the way it is. And then from a customer standpoint, if they go to a shop and they find out that this shop is honest and fixes their engine right, they're gonna wanna go there and have their transmission
Yeah,
fixed.
any-
They wanna have everything fixed
Yeah,
there if
exactly.
they can.
You miss
So-
out on one, you're done.
So really, the competition is how good is your business, and how
Right.
good are you with your customers?
Right.
Really what it boils down to.
And today, with today's complex vehicle, being a good diagnostician on both ends of the spectrum, drivability and transmission, is super important. And that's where someone could take, you know, advantage of your hotline or your information.
Right.
Because let's face it, I mean, there are plenty good programs out there, information sources. All Data, you know, is one that I really like. But sometimes you need extra help in the transmission field. And Identifix, a great resource.
Mhm. Oh,
And-
absolutely.
And you guys do the hotline stuff, you know, which is that much better.
Yeah.
So it's something that, you know, if you're not doing that out there, guess what? You're gonna need to get as many resources as you can possibly get today to diagnose and fix today's car.
And by the way, no one resource has all the answers.
None.
None of them, not even factories. They don't have all the answers.
It seems like more tools or information today than actually a tool in the toolbox now. The more information, resources you have, the better you are apt to fix that car.
Well, yeah, and you know, Google sometimes is a help,
Oh,
but
it's
sometimes
incredible.
Google is not a very good help.
Sends you
either.
down
So,
the
you
yellow
know,
brick road.
Yeah, no,
And it's tough, you know, going back to like a Tran Xbox or a UTEC, the days of just hooking these things up, transmissions have changed a lot.
Well, now you have computers in the
And the
transmission.
transmission, that's what I wanted to bring up. So it's not something that, you know, even 10 years ago, there's been a major change in transmissions that are out there. And 8 speeds, right? And
Well, they're going to 10 speeds.
10 speeds.
Yeah. From what I've read, they say that's where they're gonna cap it. but, you know.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
They wanna get miles per gallon, who knows?
For now.
Yeah.
It'll be like a big truck.
But you're aware that the transmission isn't gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 9, 8, 8, 7, 8, you know, it's
Right,
not gonna
right,
do that.
right,
It's gonna
exactly.
skip shift and
Right,
you won't
and
have
no-
any clue what gear you're in.
Right.
You'll never
It's
know.
gonna do
unless
it
you have
based on a
some
lot of
kind
inputs,
Yeah.
where it's gonna go to give you the best performance and or miles per gallon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Do we have any questions?
No, nothing yet.
No questions, okay, well, we'll just keep rattling on. So, in what we're gonna do tomorrow night, you know, we have a whole bunch of stuff planned for our hour and a half or maybe a little more webcast where we have a vehicle. You wrote an article not long ago in the Motor Age Powertrain magazine about a Ford product that we have a similar one. I think that was an 90,
No, 2007.
This is a 2006.
Right.
So it's just pretty much the same thing. So we're gonna be doing a lot of things on your end of the spectrum. And on my end of the spectrum, we're gonna be looking at a lot of things that deal with drivability.
Mhm.
Things that can affect the transmission, from a mass airflow sensor to TPS. You know, there's no more vacuum modulators like the old days,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna be looking at things on my end, and maybe you're not that good with a live scope or whatever, is where I'll come in to help out the guys maybe on the transmission end. We're gonna show you how to use an amp clamp. We're gonna use the new power probe hook to look at stuff. We'll play with individual solenoids. We'll talk about a whole bunch of different things that'll be quite helpful to all you guys out there. And again, it's live, hands on the car. Like I always say, if you've been watching our videos, when it's live, hands on, just like things mess up in your shop, oh, they'll probably mess up a little bit.
Mhm.
We're gonna try not to, but we're human. And I think it's gonna be something from scan data to speaking about everything on the transmission on your end.
Well, originally, this particular vehicle was actually in a shop in Miami. When I'm not traveling, I go to shops in Miami and actually do work on transmissions, I really do.
I thought you were at the
Yeah.
beach and you
Yeah.
weren't thanking me.
Yeah, I'd like to be at the beach, there's some really, it's a beautiful place.
South
Enough
Beach is
said.
very nice.
Yeah, but, no, seriously, there was a 2006 Explorer that was in a shop, and I didn't have a lift available yet, so I just started to work on it, and had every single solenoid code possible. And I looked at a wiring diagram, and I saw that there was one power supply to the solenoid block, and all the solenoids are controlled on the ground side at the computer. And I opened up the hood, and everything was right there. The fuse box was right there, the computer was right there, everything wide open, and all the transmission wires were at the very top connector. It couldn't have been sweeter.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the ability to do all kinds of testing was tremendous, and that was really the reason why I wrote the article, because it showed the versatility of different ways you could check each circuit, whether you wanted to check ohms, check resistances, or see if voltages are going through all the wires, or do amp checks, a whole variety of different ways. And the idea is to adapt the same thinking. There's many other vehicles that you could do the same thing, many Chrysler vehicles with 41 TEs or 42 RLEs. Very easy to do things under the hood that way, same principle.
Right, with a TCM is, then you can get.
Yeah,
it.
everything is
They
right.
put it right in the firewall or whatever, with the
Yeah,
plug right in
so-
front of you.
And so what we're gonna be
Yeah.
doing tomorrow night is showing how to, for this particular application, there's lots of Explorers,
Oh,
and these
lots.
come into the shop big time. And so we're gonna show fast ways to check solenoid circuits, and we're gonna do amperage checks, because this particular transmission is unique in that it has 3 pressure control solenoids and how they function, and we're gonna show how they influence pressure. And out of 3 pressure control solenoids, there's 2 pressure taps, 1 for 2 solenoids, and 1 for the other solenoid. So it's an interesting arrangement. We're gonna explain all that. We're gonna talk about speed sensors and O2 sensors sharing the same ground circuit. And we're gonna be doing voltage drop test on that. And then there's a lot of different TCC issues that are resolved with a
With the reflash.
With a reflash. A number of different things that you would absolutely face with these. The problem ultimately came out to be where air conditioning condensation is dripping down on the transmission, and it
And
corrodes the
going to
connector. And when you actually unplug it, you got all this water coming out of it, and even pins come out of the solenoid block in the connector itself. And when I wrote the article, I was not aware that there was a bulletin on it by Ford, and they have a cover that you can buy to go over the solenoid connector to waterproof it. And I didn't know that when I wrote the article, so we'll mention that tomorrow night.
Excellent. And it's always a good idea, I think we have a couple of questions, not to cut you short, but it's always a good idea to look at TSBs, and we'll talk about that more tomorrow. And remember this, guys, I want to ask him a question about programming after this question.
Okay, this is not a question, this is more of a statement from Ken Elzinga. He says, I have always thought that if I know how the system works, I have a good background to fix it. I like your books that explain how it works because this is the info that helps me fix the problem cars. Keep giving us that info.
Well, thank you
Excellent,
very
Ken.
much.
Just leave the guy's first name in case they get.
He gets a free 1-year subscription at ATSG.
Be careful, take it up on
I'm
that.
gonna hold you to it now.
It's gonna hold you to it. Ken, thank you for your comment. And anyone out there, questions or comments, it's pretty hard to get someone like Wayne to sit down here with us and do this. And we're grateful to all the guests that we do have on. And this is a real special treat. So if you have a question about transmissions or anything, I mean,
This is a round
This
table,
is a
and
round
you can bring
table.
up some other subject, actually.
Yeah, these guys know a lot of other things that I don't know, so.
We've worked on a car or two, actually.
Wayne, if somebody wanted to get involved in just starting to rebuild the transmission, where would you go to?
Now, that is a very good question. A lot of schools do not exist
That's
anymore.
why I'm asking.
I don't really not sure what trade schools teach, so I'm not an authority to even comment. But
question.
some of the classes at the schools that we used to have, nobody's sent to them anymore.
Yes, you almost have
Nobody
to
wants to spend the money and, right,
Right.
it's very hard to do a school. So you would actually have to do some kind of an apprenticeship in a transmission shop with a builder and a owner that's willing to train.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because I've looked at years.
We used to do schools, but they dwindled. To take a guy out of a shop for a whole week, put him up in a hotel, airfare, pay for the school, pay for the food, maybe even pay his paycheck.
Yeah,
That doesn't happen anymore.
well, they used to have school like even in Terrytown, I used to go to take R&R,
Yeah.
Well, factories used to send people to school. I was sent to school years ago in the
Same here.
70s for training. But nowadays, they're all modularized.
Yeah.
They have a rebuild facility someplace that does them.
Yeah, right,
In
exactly.
fact, in
So-
some cases, they don't sell too many parts.
They're
Well,
crate
Well, they
transmission.
stopped that because there's so many recalls, so many problems, because it was just a solenoid issue, and they were changing all transmissions for just a solenoid issue.
And one thing that I'm going to relate back to what Wayne came up with when you did the part for my hybrid book on transmissions, where there was a bearing that I believe Toyota was the company would not sell, and you guys figured out what bearing, because there's only so many bearings made,
Yeah,
what bearing actually fits in there with the race and stuff, so you could actually rebuild it.
yeah.
And that is pretty neat, because that's pretty hard to find out there. A lot of these companies really don't want you touching, they rather crate units in.
So on that
So it's a
other big
lost
ask
art.
that question, in your seminars, what is actually brought up for topics that you just,
Well, the seminars are really designed for the people that really know transmissions already, or people that need to know how to diagnose, because it has a lot of diagnostic information in it too. But it's, for someone new to get into this business, the learning curve is
quite a bit?
pretty big, but the interesting thing is if we had young people getting into it, I think they would adapt really quick because most of them are computer savvy. right? We got they understand computers, so maybe from a diagnostic standpoint, they can catch on pretty quick. But taking the transmissions apart and rebuilding them, you know, it takes a certain finesse with the hands
Yeah.
and understanding.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because if somebody wanted to attend one of your seminars, you walk in there blind, you're.
Yeah, it wouldn't be for a beginner, not at all.
It's not for the installer either, it's really for the guy.
Yeah, it's really for people that diagnose.
Or just
and-
had some experience taking them apart,
Yeah,
even if they haven't
experience.
even, just know what the parts look like.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
You have to understand basic functions,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely.
you know.
And I mean, you know, transmissions have changed so much, different fluids that have to be used,
Mhm.
you know, different symptoms you can get by, you know, maybe even one converter where it's not broken in, or a different clutch pack that you've used or material.
Adaptations that are
Adaptations.
reset.
That, you know, could be a major problem sometimes.
Mhm.
Just like today, when an adaptation is off, a tranny may exhibit problems that you think you gotta pull it apart, and you may not have.
That's right. Yeah, well, you know, you really have to recognize that transmission is not just mechanical, it's electrical, hydraulic, and mechanical, and all work together. And you have one aspect of it that's not right, it affects everything.
Now, Wayne, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, you know, we talked about TSBs on reflashing. What do you think the percentage of guys in your industry, in the transmission end of the business, are doing reflashing?
In the transmission
In the
business?
transmission, just in the transmission field?
Geez.
Is it very low?
Yeah, there's only a few people that really got into it. Most of the transmission shops bring them someplace
To
to
the
get it.
dealer or shop?
They don't want to invest the money in it or something, or they're afraid of it, or whatever the case may be, but.
A little of everything. Plus, you know, in some cases, they can't just refresh a transmission computer, they have to do an engine computer if they're separate.
Right.
And they may not want to, like you said, they won't want to invest in equipment for an industry they're not even in.
Yeah,
Or if you do something like on some GMs, when you do a reflash, it may go even into the engine reflash. Now you gotta do a crankshaft relearn, and they may go, what's that? I'm not familiar with that.
yeah, it can
And not
be
that they
involved,
can't
yeah.
learn
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
it could be
So
involved.
there's a learning curve with that just as well. But I know that everyone that has put their toe in the water and learned it, make money now.
Exactly.
They make
Exactly.
money with it.
We have a
Question?
question.
Yes, there is. Okay, another question from Ken. It says, there are so many fluids today, every car seems to have its own fluid.
Yeah.
Some fluid manufacturers are marketing fluid that is supposed to cover multiple applications. What is your perspective on this? Is it possible for a single fluid to cover Mercon 5, Dextron 6, ATF plus 4, etc., etc.?
That's a $1 million question. Actually, I know what a lot of shops do, but I can't tell you that I know for sure. But I know that a lot of shops use high-end synthetic transmission fluid across the board to circumvent this particular problem, because they have so many different oils and the expense of it, to try to run the VW for this oil and BMW for this oil and Ford for this oil. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's a money-making scam, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, let me
Maybe you
ask-
should edit that, I don't know, but.
It's too late
now.
I'd like
We're
to
live.
add to that, a lot of guys want to use a flushing machine, and how could you possibly keep all those fluids separate? You couldn't.
Yeah, I know Craig uses a lot of high-end synthetic stuff, and sometimes uses additives. I don't know if we want to mention a name.
Well, but you know, it
A
seems.
company with additives, but,
But my honest concern is, I know that that's what everyone does, or I shouldn't say everyone.
a lot of
A
people.
lot of people do. Now, I don't know how many bumps and clunks and chatters we're trying to fix because we think the fluid is okay.
Ah. Now, let me ask you a question. Additives. I'll mention a name, like LubeGuard, who's been around for years. I have experience using their stuff, and I think it's pretty top-notch.
Loop guard is very good.
There's
It
a
is
lot of
very
training
good.
shops, even years back when I used to build, you'd keep one fluid. Didn't matter if you had to have Ford Type F or whatever, screw that. You put in the regular fluid and you would put the LubeGuard additive in.
Yeah.
And I really didn't have problems.
What about Lucas?
Not familiar.
Really?
Yeah, with
This ain't a pyramid.
No, and the transmission business.
Lucas is, they're pretty good into racing and,
Yeah, but I mean on a day-to-day, on
no,
the
this is
phone
where they
business.
put these additives to, it's like this lube gun thing, but, I thought it was.
I've seen it, I don't have experience with it, I've seen it.
I've seen the name,
Yeah,
that's it.
But Lubo only has one additive.
No, that's not true.
Oh, Luke Dog has a bunch
No,
of
no, no,
Lucas.
Oh, Lucas.
Oh, Lucas only
Oil
has
that's one.
and transmission.
yeah, but it's just one.
Because Luke
What
Dog
he's
has a whole
referring to,
range.
Yeah, range.
Oh,
So
Luke
you could
Dog-
do Ford,
Luke
you could do
Dog has-
Chrysler, you could do, but they also have one as well.
They have the
does them all.
synthetic one,
Yes.
Yeah.
that's a gold bottle. or
Yeah, they
something
have a
like that.
variety of different applications. They have a nice breakdown of what their additives do.
But, you know, I wonder, like you just said, how many problems you think you're using the right fluid? You know, like Honda's real fussy. I know here, when some transmissions were rebuilt, they were using XYZ fluid. And they exhibited some problems in the transmission, even with an additive. When he took it out and he bought the Honda stuff, the problem went away.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a tough
And I
call.
have to say, Honda is definitely one that we really prefer Honda fluid for. There's no doubt about it. We've fought way too many tail end bumps, harsh shifts. Fluid to friction compatibility is something that is engineered in.
Is it programmed?
Oh, yes, it's programmed too.
The way the shifts are handled and it's all taken into consideration because
Timing.
when you put the wrong fluid in,
Yeah.
you know, when you're going clutch to clutch, meaning that, you know, one clutch has gotta come off while another one comes on, it's gotta be translucent, that shift, and
Yeah, so
it's
look
gotta
at-
hold the gear train tight, yet make the transition without binding up the gearbox. Or you can, if it's too aggressive, you feel like the clapping of a clutch coming on, as it's being pulsed on, one being pulsed off perhaps, or you get a momentary tie-up, which gives it a nice nasty shift. So, you know, fluid does have a tremendous effect on the shift, absolutely
And
does.
just like we say with motor oil on our end, it's not all of it's created equal.
No.
No.
So I would think, you know, same on the tranny side, I'd be very careful and use, you know, the right fluid. I know Craig also gets stuff from our buddies at Run Right, where they have high-end synthetic fluid that he's had pretty damn good luck with, even testing it out on Hondas.
I've had pretty good luck with my
Yeah.
brand too as well.
So, you know, whatever I guess works for you, but if you're a tranny shop rebuilding, you really gotta know what's gonna work, because that's a big price tag. And do you wanna risk it, you know, using the wrong fluid? And some of these crate units come with fluid in it, and I'll tell you, make sure you use this in check, or use only this fluid.
And then, of course, you gotta watch warranties.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, we should know that, right?
Yeah, of
You
course.
put the wrong fluid in on a warranty.
You're in
it's-
trouble.
you're-
You bought it.
you're void. Yeah, it's over. It's over.
On a fluid note, CVTs, I'm sure they're.
Well, that's another webinar that's
my
coming up on June
24th?
I think it's the 20th.
We have
June
it at the-
20th. June 20th is a webinar that I'll be doing,
On servicing CFT.
Well,
CVT.
the question is, the pros and cons of rebuilding a CVT, you know, when can one be rebuilt, when is it time to replace one? We're gonna go through details on that.
And fluid aspects too, when to change it. Because they say never-
Fluid's a part of it, you know, yeah.
That's everybody's paranoid to change or touch.
I thought they weren't rebuildable because you couldn't get parts, so.
Well, that's part of what the webinar is about.
Yeah.
What the webinar is, it's gonna be a PowerPoint presentation. It won't be live, it'll be live, PowerPoint presentation, but it won't be like what we're gonna do tomorrow night, where we're gonna be in the garage
On the
on a
car.
vehicle.
I had a Nissan Murano that wouldn't work in four-wheel drive, well, it loud clunking, I made it a front-wheel drive and the car's still running, so it's a year and a half, it's running as a two-wheel drive.
You took a four-wheel drive, made it two.
Took the rear drive
Rear
shaft.
drive shaft out and just made it a front-wheel drive.
Mhm.
What was your issue?
Because you had an issue with a clump.
Yeah, the rear part of it, was clunking and it's still running. I thought it wouldn't have lasted, but the guy you're still driving it.
Yeah, well, actually, maybe not having all four tires actually made it live a little longer.
And speaking about that, you know, when people really ruin powertrains, and I know Pierre being Mr. X-Drive man here, you know, some people really ruin their powertrain by putting one tire or two new tires on rather than four on an all-wheel drive car. Seems to be, at least in our mechanical end, seems to be a problem.
Actually, it's more than just that. I mean, it affects the stability system, ABS, right? And people really chase their tails on that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Well, tire
sometimes
sizes-
they have transmission
No,
codes.
tire sizes are a real pain. They cause all kinds of issues. And, you know, I had thought, well, the first time we experienced it was with a BMW. You're a BMW guy. That was the first time we experienced
That's
it.
Pierre's middle name.
Yeah.
And it had late shifts. The heavier you're into the throttle, the later it would shift.
Yeah.
Sometimes on kickdown, it wouldn't shift at all. It would be just hold the lower gear because it thinks it's in a turn.
Right.
But the Land Rovers,
Same
Get
technology.
the holy water
Yeah.
out of a Land Rover.
they have the same problem. All these
It's a lot of
high-end,
the same technology.
yeah.
So the
that's all the
circumference
same
of the
stuff.
tire will just.
Just an
Yeah.
underinflated tire. It's all
I
it
had one
takes.
do that
Yeah.
to me, a BMW 7 Series.
But besides the underinflated, the different thread depths.
Yeah,
seem to
yeah.
make a
Well, absolutely.
difference.
You got
Too new, too old?
No, you got one that's got all worn treads, and they take a flat and they put a spare on. Just that one spare.
Yeah.
And I think
We'll
that's
do
That's all that
okay.
it takes. Yeah.
Right.
That's all it takes.
And now the computer sees the difference in
Questions?
circumference
And it
and
makes- it
thinks
makes a
that you're in a
difference.
turn and starts applying either stability control, or it might shift different. It'll change the way the shift points are set up, or it'll change the way the power is delivered because it sees a problem in the drivetrain.
So Neil, you had a question before on a transmission you were speaking to Wayne?
Well, basically, it's on a 2000 Volvo V70R that I did flush. It had a lot of miles on it. I flushed it, and then it developed a chatter.
Well, you said it's a 2000, right?
Yep.
So you have a 5-speed,
Mhm.
right? That's a TF80 SC. It's like an Asian Warner 5550.
Okay.
And so how many miles was it?
175.
175,000, and you changed the fluid?
Well, this guy was
For the
going-
first time.
You know how customers
Right,
go on to
yeah.
the computer and he got in touch with this guy from California that has a couple of these. He says, yeah, just change the transmission. So I just did what the customer wanted me to do. So,
Yeah, well, gosh, there could be a whole lot of things going on there. I'm surprised it went 175,000 miles to begin with, actually. That's good. Those solenoids have big issues. Valve bodies have big issues, but the fact that it seemed to show up after you did a flush almost seems like you've got some things floating around in there maybe, and the solenoids
Clutch
are not
material
working right, and, you know, but you've got some wear in there for sure. So even if you change the valve body, or recondition the valve body and solenoid, I would suspect that you've got other issues inside. You might as well just pull it out and rebuild it.
well, this guy first initially said, I want to keep this car going as long as I
Yes.
can. You know, and he came out with a bill of, altogether $2,500, and now if he hears he's got to do another spend, oh, I don't know,
Yeah, well,
Well,
So that's the politics of auto repair.
That's our business.
They either love it and they're gonna keep it forever, or they're gonna sell it in a couple of weeks or a month, and
It's a
therefore.
station car, what's
Yeah.
wrong with you? Get rid of it soon, station
And
car.
We've
3
heard
months,
all,
it's gone.
we've heard all those lines, haven't we?
Now, this brings up a good question before we get to the question up there. What is your take on changing transmission fluid after a vehicle has gone, let's say, 60,000 miles?
I personally change mine every 50,000.
Every 50?
I do, myself.
why 50, not 30?
Oh, I could do a 30, but I just go 50. It seems to be fine. The fluid's
It
still
depends
low.
on the temperature or
What about
overheat.
these newer cars like Toyota at 30 and or a little bit before, it's really dirty.
Yeah, I mean, the more frequent you change the fluid,
The better
it is
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay, but
Yeah.
what's the cutoff point? Let's say 100,000 miles, the guy didn't do anything, and he comes in to Neil and says, Neil, I want to change my transmission.
That's Russian roulette as far as I'm concerned.
The same way.
I did have a Mazda that I did years ago, that the oil, transmission oil was black, but it had some issues. By doing the transmission flush, it took care of it.
Yeah, long
That's
one.
still Russian roulette.
If you gotta educate your customers.
You got an empty chamber, that was
Yeah,
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, you gotta let them sign something, or in my opinion, I mean.
Well, I know, I
spent years
told
back-
him, listen, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, you never know.
In the BMW world, my, kind of philosophy, what I told my customers was,
It's a machine.
I don't wanna go past 60,000 miles, for a tranny flush.
I don't blame you.
Once you reach about 75, 80,000, I'm just probably not gonna do it for you. If I do, you're gonna have to sign this big waiver indicating that you understand fully that this transmission could be on its last legs anyway, and the flush could dislodge something that causes a failure, and
Or
I'm not liable for
causes-
that. You're gonna be buying a transmission overhaul.
Right.
Now,
Question.
sign that.
Question on the internet. before we
Yes.
get to you.
Another question from Ken. I had an '08 Silverado in today with a 6-speed Allison. Complaint was intermittent shift flares. Tried to look at shift adapts, but there were no data PIDs for shift adapts. It only had PSI PIDs for the different shifts. Is there a way to correlate these PIDs to shift adapts? Is this covered in any of your reference material? Great webinar.
thanks.
Thank you.
I don't know the answer to that question at all. I don't know why you're not getting those PIDs
Must
in the first place.
What scan tool is he using?
I'll have to ask him. I'll have to ask him.
Oh, he could hear us. He can
Oh.
just type back to you. But
Okay.
Ken, what scan tool are you using? Because some scan tools.
Tech 2.
Tech
Tech 2
2. Oh,
should
well,
have
hey, Tech 2 should have it.
Wow, really? Well, if there's a way to correlate it, I don't know off the top of my head, but
Maybe you could email you?
I could look into it, because I don't know the answer to that question.
That's how honest
see.
Wayne is. But I would think the Tech 2, I mean, I own one. I never recall running across any problem with transmission data.
especially for that particular-
Pretty good,
Yeah,
very good.
but that's a parameter that really should be there. I'm surprised it's not. It has been.
Factory scheme.
Yeah.
It's like having a Chrysler with no CVI.
Well, you know what? The 62 TE is that way.
That way, right.
Yeah, there is no CVI.
But most of the.
Yeah,
they
but
try to
you're
steal.
talking like the 604, you know,
Right,
and
right.
all of a sudden that PID's not there, that doesn't.
Then
make sense.
you're worried.
Yeah.
Wayne, what do you feel about DSG transmissions?
I'm sorry?
DSG, direct shift?
Direct shift gearboxes and dual clutch transmissions, I like driving them.
Yeah.
They're fun to drive.
How about working on it?
Well, you know, they're like CVTs in the sense that it's parts availability.
Yeah.
But like for instance, the DSG that's in the Volkswagens.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
That one, been out long enough now where there's parts available, but the big problem is the double clutch drum. You have the C1 or K1 and the C2, K2. The C2, K2 is welded into the C1.
Oh my God.
So you can take the C2, K2, you can take it apart, take the piston out, you can do seals, but the K1, you can't get the piston out, so you can't change the seals.
Yeah,
And there's no way
And
to.
there's maybe a failure.
So you
right
can't
there.
rebuild it.
You gotta buy the whole assembly. You have to buy the whole clutch drum assembly.
Good way for them to make.
That's
profit.
why they sell gearboxes.
As
Yeah.
in fluid changes for that unit, the same as any other transmission, just go by manufacturer's spec, or?
Well, yeah, they want their.
They have their special.
Now, wait,
Sorry,
you know,
I-
speaking about that gets me thinking about a major problem. I remember even working for the dealers years back, building 904s and 727s for Chryslers, and we had a rash of problems with converters. What's your take when you do a transmission, if you see, let's say, the clutches are just one, do you ever suggest leaving, just flushing everything out and leaving the original converter? Because some of these rebuilt or whatever are scary, and I know the right thing to do would be changing it, but we just seen or heard today from one of our friends down the road at a transmission place. I was kind of nervous seeing all those defective torque converters there. So what's your take on it? Uh-oh, I forget the no, don't answer that.
That's another webinar.
That's one he can't answer,
Well,
we'll be
you
in
know,
trouble.
what makes that a difficult question to answer in many respects is, number one, if it's an original transmission with an original torque converter, you have to take into consideration how many miles, the condition of the transmission, just the condition of the whole system, the cooling system, why did the transmission fail in the first place, and what kind of contamination is in there before you would make some kind of determination if you're gonna use that converter.
Or what
over
kind of
again.
trauma it went
Right.
through.
Yeah, exactly. And if it seems like it's a doable thing, you know, sometimes it's better to leave the original rings on the transmission too, if a clutch pack isn't burnt.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to keep what you can original, but it's like anything else, you're taking a chance.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of labor
It's a
chance.
judgment call.
But then on the other spectrum, you know, there's a lot of good torque converter remanufacturers out there, and I know how hard they do to have quality control. They're there, but why did the converter fail? It might not necessarily be because of the converter. It could be something that caused the converter to fail. And
Maybe
so
some lineup or
there's
whatever.
you know,
There's
there's
tons.
lots of things to take into consideration. So to just give a one pat answer is not going to fit every scenario.
The percentages of converters that you've seen in the industry are overall good, what percentage would be good overall of remans? Since you get a lot of calls.
Yeah, but I can't gauge my phone calls compared to how many are really going out there and working. I get, you know, I get 300 calls a day, right?
Right.
So let's say out of 300, 10% of them are related to the converter. That can't be a sample size enough to say what's really going on day in and day out.
Yeah,
So,
each one could be its own particular problem.
Well, the reason why I brought that up, I think Pierre had a bad converter, didn't you?
well, he
It
had,
turns out that was a pilot error. I'll admit to this. I screwed that up.
Pierre? Oh, this is a first.
Yeah, I screwed that up.
What
I
happened?
just found out. When I went, the guide I used to align the pump was not a proper fit.
Oh, boy.
That was my fault. I just took it apart over the weekend.
yeah,
that was my
but
fault.
the guy that we saw today, that was, you
And it
could
wore the-
see that there
Oh.
was something wrong with that
Oh,
converter.
yeah. We've seen that with our own
Yeah,
eyes.
that was assembled
Yeah.
incorrectly.
Oh, somebody actually built it wrong.
We were
It
over to
was
see
totally
people.
built
Right.
wrong. It was visible. You could see it was built wrong.
And that's tough when you gotta eat that job and
Yeah,
take that out.
but, you know, I mean, that happens. It happens. It
I guess
happens.
even with new
Yes, it
stuff, obviously it
happens.
happens. But I just figured I'd ask that question.
Phone ring.
Now,
Yeah,
what do
something
you,
happened.
now, what do you think about, you know, there's a lot of transmissions where there's no stick. I know what a lot of training shops around here do. They have these universal sticks. You know, there's no tubes to check how
Dipstick,
much
yep.
fluid's in the dipsticks I'm talking about.
Mm.
Should be more specific.
Okay.
What's your feeling on these guys filling a lot of these units up without having the proper equipment? And it seems like people do that out there, either with pumps like the
Well, no,
Beamers and the Volkswagens and stuff.
Yeah.
You need
They
a
flush 'em
tool.
through.
You need a scan tool and they just kind of, people guess what goes in them.
Yeah, they guess and they don't even pay attention to
Do you see
procedures.
a lot of that or get a lot of calls on that? Hey, how do I know what the fluid is on a hotline or
No,
that's?
well, I don't, you know, that's a good question because most of the transmission shops, maybe I assume they know how to fill it up right. And maybe that's why they got some slipping problems, and I'm not aware of that, you know, it's
Well,
actually
foaming-
something I,
foaming it.
Oh,
you know.
foaming it, right,
You know,
yeah.
I'm talking
Overfill.
to a guy who's doing transmissions for 20 years, and I'm gonna say, is the transmission filled with
Yeah.
fluid correctly? I'm not gonna be one of the questions that I'm typically going to ask.
But you know what I'm saying, like some of the Volkswagens
Yeah.
or
Well,
BMWs.
BMW has a specific procedure, you know, you have to fill it between 30C and 50C.
Mhm. Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
my number,
55C.
and my number is 30C. I fill it up actually in the 20s, and then as it warms up, I let a little spill out till I'm right at that max level.
And, you know, that's a really interesting point to be made, because in Toyota's U660, last year's seminar, we went through the procedures on how to do that. And with that particular transmission, you know you've got the tip up, tip down. How many have you seen where you can tip up to all the way to high gear and tip down all the way to low gear at a standstill in gear with not moving? Have you? The most you could get up is as high as maybe second or third,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
With Toyota, the U660, they want you to bump it all the way up to 6 and bring it all the way back down to first.
While you're filling.
Because they want to load all the packs, they want to get
They
all
wanna-
the
they wanna
oil
purge
up.
and all the air bubbles. or
Exactly
whatever out.
right, and you can't drop, you can't take off in 6. You know, this is only, they want the temperature to come up, they want you to fill up all the clutch packs, and then, of course, you have to pump the oil in and make sure that you've got the stream coming out, that little spaghetti string,
And did it have a scan tool pit on that one?
Yes, it did. You could do, and they also had a procedure that if you didn't have it, there was a way to cross the diagnostic connector, and by looking at the D light, if the D light came on and held steady, the temperature was perfect to check the fluid. If it was blinking,
like Toyota.
if it was blinking, it was too hot. If it wasn't on at all, it was too cold. Something like that.
That's
See, those guys
Good
think about that
information.
stuff. They make it
Good
easy to
That's real
service.
good information.
Yeah, we did that all last
See,
year.
we're
in our
picking your
seminar.
brain, no matter what.
Yeah.
Any questions
The
on
guru.
that? No. You guys have no questions? Wow. When it's not every day you get Wayne,
Oh, come on.
and you
please.
can ask these good questions. Anything else from you guys?
I was gonna
Well,
ask
see-
about my torque converter thing until I found out it was me.
Well, I heard just at our last seminar, the teacher was talking about the new adaptations with the key. So each key's got its own adaptations for shift points of the transmission now. It learns its shift points per driver.
But keys have identities now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, BMW's actually had that for a while. Volkswagen's had it too in their high-end stuff. So you have to make sure that the same person, if there are 3 drivers or 2 drivers and 2 keys in a family, you have to make sure that the same person always uses the same key. Otherwise,
They won't like the way it shifts.
they won't like the way, not only the way it shifts, but the way the whole car behaves. It'll be the mirror settings, the seat settings, the shift points, all of that.
This is like out of
Throttle
control.
response,
Insane.
it is insane.
Great.
So imagine the phone calls you're gonna get when somebody gets a
And
different
so-
key.
Especially if the battery goes
One,
dead.
one of the issues, I mean, it can be a tranny issue, it can be a drivability issue, but a customer comes in and they say, this car is doing whatever, X, Y, Z, but they then hand you the key that's not the one that they're driving with.
And that's
And
important.
you go for a test drive and it behaves perfectly.
Well, that's why I asked, that's why I made the question, because people, I wasn't
And-
aware of that until it was brought up.
So now, one of the things you have to ask them is this the key that you are using when the problem occurs?
See? Transmission guys can learn from
There you
drivability
go.
guys and
Yeah.
vice versa.
I was not aware of that.
Personalities.
Personalities, I mean,
And a
yeah,
key.
Europeans have been doing it for years.
Now, the other thing you have to be
Follow
extremely
them.
careful of course, I'm guilty of it myself sometimes.
Now you, Peter.
I know how to remove the code.
Five BMW keys are coming out of his pocket.
These are both the same, the keys to the same car. You don't want them on the same key ring.
It's not good. He had them in the same pocket, by the
But
way.
that's okay, but you don't put
This is
them,
Pierre.
you don't put them on the same key
I was gonna
ring.
say, you
Yeah,
know,
that's
I
why I
asked
said
a question.
There's a reason for that.
Put it in
Huh?
the other pocket.
Put it in the other pocket. The bottom line is, when you do that, sometimes you can confuse the car.
Right, because it's gonna read it. I mean, a lot of times that's how you even make keys
Well,
operate,
it's
right?
gonna,
Right.
Sticking them together.
Right.
the key reader's gonna see a different code.
Right.
But it may not get the identity right.
Yeah.
And so,
The CAS unit?
You know what it's boiled down
Cas.
to?
I know about the
yes,
CAS unit
Cas
now.
unit, yeah, I'm sure you do now.
You know what it's boiled down to? Something we said earlier before. Us older guys have a lot of experience out there. So much experience that is gonna be gone in the next 10 years or so because we're gonna
Speak for
retire and
yourself,
get
I'm
out.
gonna live forever.
Well, may you. But you know what I'm saying? A lot of young people, this stuff takes so long.
Takes a long
really
time to learn,
it.
yeah.
Not that they can't, but there's so much that we don't even know after all the years.
Well, I'm here for one reason, because of people like us. I
Yeah.
mean, you learn from each other.
Yeah.
There's no way you can learn it all.
And you never know everything, and that's why we hope you guys out there in enjoy our seminars and roundtables. We wish you were more active in them and asking questions like hopefully we have one right
I
now.
have two questions.
Two? Oh, yeah. All right.
One from Bobby. He says, what's the best kind of sealant when putting the case back together?
Yellow bond, no.
Well, I used
It
to
depends.
call it gorilla snot, but I don't know.
That's not the proper name, sorry.
You know, a good RTV.
Good silicone.
Yeah, so RTV
I
black silicone, but you know, when you're using that, we've had where people were extremely generous with the use of that silicone.
You're being extremely generous with that
You know,
terminology.
and
Sloppy is the word.
The crap that gets inside that transmission is horrible what it does. So, you know, RTV black is what I use. It's a,
Right stuff.
The right stuff is good, and you need the right size bead. You don't
Yeah,
want it
right.
going all the way in or all the way
That's what I'm
out.
telling
Just the
and-
right amount.
And
Well,
you
Yeah,
don't
like
wanna
the
load up
propane
those
commercials.
bolt holes, man.
Oh, that's another bitch, the
Yeah,
bolt
the
holes.
bolt holes is another,
That's really bad, and people wonder why they got leaky pans and so on.
yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Next question.
Next question is from Harold, and this is a good question.
Uh-oh.
Why did some of the OEMs take away the trans dipstick?
I'm really, there's been some different opinions that I've heard about it, but one of the reasons was that they could pre-fill the units at the factory and for shipping and things of that nature. And I kind of welcomed it because it
Prevents the end user from making a mistake.
well, it gets the transmission fluid change into the shop. You know, a typical guy is not gonna be able to do it.
Right.
You know.
And the story I kind of heard of the dipstick is they didn't want people just going into a station and someone taking, oh, it's tranny fluid and putting it down into this BMW that needs synthetic and running
Right.
into a problem.
Yeah.
And also look at
What
the fill
about-
But
procedures,
the,
you know?
but, and I've heard that, and I heard the other one was, you know how much money they saved not having a dipstick and a filler tube?
Sure.
Yeah, but what about also this transmission fluid that's like $15 or $20 a quart, that they almost don't even want you to change transmission fluid. They say it's non-serviceable.
Lifetime.
Well,
Of course, how do
AXODs
you
used to do that, they
define
couldn't afford it.
lifetime?
Remember, they didn't want you to touch them.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
wouldn't last.
Yeah, but, you know, that was all, that's a whole warranty, thing there.
Yeah.
The lifetime of the warranty
But-
is more like it.
But, you know, they had better control with pre-fill, and watching the fluid. In fact, you know, what you just mentioned was pretty interesting, because on some of the Mercedes, they don't have a dipstick, you have to buy a tool, but there is a filler tube.
Yeah.
But
Like
there's.
my 300 had that time.
Yeah, but there's a mistake that oftentimes happens where to fill the engine oil and transmission, there's some kind of like a tube there as well. And we've actually
Right
had
next
where
to each other.
people put transmission fluid into the engine by mistake.
Yeah, they're right next to each other.
Mm. Yeah.
There's
Like,
always
this close to
mistakes.
each
Now that's a dipstick.
Yeah.
There's
We're
always,
talking about the person.
there's always a lot of possibilities.
Winners and losers.
Exactly. Okay, any other questions? We want to say thank you to our special guest, Wayne Colonna from ATSG, and all the good people there at ATSG. Do you guys know how to flip that next slide? There's a little thing there, move the slide to the left or right of the screen.
Maybe, maybe not.
You see a little arrow thing?
Mm-hmm.
Did you do it? You need help?
Now we did it.
Good. So we want to thank the people at ATSG, the whole team, like I said, starting today. You know, to me, he is a guru. He is Mr. Transmission. He knows a lot. He's a wealth of information. He's taken the leap of making that jump into drivability, and you're the bridge between transmission and drivability, in my opinion. We've seen him way back even at Jim Lender's, and you've come out here for our TST group many, many times. And I've always found your stuff super helpful, and I know
Yeah, a lot
these
of
guys
information.
have as many as, or as well as our members, I should say. So tomorrow night, please don't miss our on-car. And that'll go out about an hour and a half, and who knows, maybe a little more. You'll see this guy again, Mr. Pierre.
Yeah, we're gonna be the
And of course, you
The
get
wrench
tired
turners, you
of
know.
seeing and hearing me.
Jose one and
But,
Jose two.
We will give you some real good information. And again, thank you to all the TST board members here and Doreen and Ed behind the cameras here for TST. And once again, Mr. Wayne, it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Wayne.
and thank you most of all. Have a
Yep,
good night.
thank you.
See
Good night.
tomorrow. Good night.